Let me give you the law of success for business and entrepreneurship podcasting. So before I get into the nitty gritty, you have to understand. Here are my opening arguments. The thing is, when you are starting a business podcast, when you are focusing on entrepreneurship, you can do it for your brain, or you can just do it just for the topic. In other words, you don't have to have a business to actually start a business podcast. You can just start a business podcast because you love the topic and you do have some kind of knowledge about the whole entrepreneurship sort of equation, if you will. Okay, so you also have to understand that you got to start with what you know. Don't try to really get into a field or into a niche that's very complicated or that's really foreign to your knowledge skill, to your knowledge base. Okay, to your skill set. You want to start somewhere where you're comfortable. Let me give you an example. If in the past you own restaurants, you can start a podcast around the hospitality business. That way, you have some knowledge about the hospitality business. You can also have guests over on your show, okay, that who are really knowledgeable in the hospitality business. So it's important. So you always want to start from where you know. Okay, let me first go back a quick minute to the whole definition of what a business podcast really is, because for you to understand the law of success for business and entrepreneurship podcasting, you have to understand what a business entrepreneurship podcast really is. So, a business podcast, or let's say a branded podcast, is a podcast that ultimately exists to promote your product, service, or a business. So, that's number one. Number two, a business podcast is a podcast that really talks about topics about business, topics of entrepreneurship, topics of, let's say, innovation, topics, anything that revolves around how to run a business. You can really have that. You can probably have you can have a guest who have experience in business. Think about it as a show that you might have on CNBC, or a show that you might have on Fox Business, or a show that you might have on what, CNN Money, or Bloomberg TV. So it has to be something related to business. One thing you need to understand here is that a business podcast can take a variety of forms, and the most appropriate format will depend on the nature of your audience, the nature of your business, the nature of your industry, the nature of the customer base, the nature of the topics that you cover. Okay, so one thing I want you really I want you to remember that is that business podcasts can also refer to podcasts that focus on business, finance, or entrepreneurship. Okay, so literally podcasts about starting a business or running a business. Now, what are the benefits of let's say starting a business podcast? I mean, this year. The thing is that when it comes to starting a business podcast, you have to understand you are in it for the long run. Okay, so you can start a business podcast to increase website traffic and drive sales, to amp up your digital marketing, to develop and diversify your brand, to share your expertise and establish yourself in the industry. Okay, and you can use it to reach new audiences and build your community. You can repurpose your podcasting content, and also you are able to create potential partnerships and sponsorships. Okay, and you can also monetize a business podcast very easily. So this is very important. If you before I give you the law of success for business and entrepreneurship podcasting, you got to know the benefits. So, for instance, when I talk about increasing website traffic and drive sales, well, you are able to use the podcast about entrepreneurship and business to funnel traffic to your website, driving exposure and sales all in one go. You'll be able to do something. For instance, you can consistently plug and promote your product or service and recommend your listeners visit actually your website to find out more. You can do the same for other people's products too. I mean, when you do that, you can earn a commission on the sale, on every sale, and that's called affiliate marketing. And you can also share your expertise and establish yourself in the industry. Okay, so basically, when you think about a business podcast, think about it as a marketing tool, as a tool that allows you to really expand your knowledge, expand also your exposure, really. So let me give you the law of success actually for business podcasting. But you have to ask yourself, the field you're in, is a business podcast worth the effort? In other words, can you really monetize it? Can you really scale it? Can you really run it in a very efficient way? Well, the thing is that when the effort needed to actually start and produce a business podcast is so minimal, the answer is a no-brainer. Yes. Okay. So a business podcast is definitely worth the effort. I don't care if you do it for your knowledge about the topic, or you're doing it for expanding, let's say, your own company's products or services. Okay. It's very easy to start a business podcast or a podcast about entrepreneurship. It is also very affordable. Let me break it down for you. Why is it very start to start a business podcast? Well, basically, there is an extremely low barrier to entry. All you need to do is have a basic podcasting setup, and you are good to go. Of course, you got to have the knowledge, right? You can't just have a mic and just speak gibberish. You got to have a clear idea about what you're conveying. You got to have some kind of knowledge, some kind of, let's say, intellectual foundation. So that's an important. Also, if you have a business, if you have an established business, you will have tons of content banked that can actually be easily repurposed and showcased in podcast form. So that's kind of cool. Okay. Also, it's very affordable to start and run a business podcast, business/entrepreneurship podcast. So basically, nowadays you have software like Costos or Riverside that make it very easy and very affordable, okay, to actually start a business or entrepreneurship podcast. And so one thing I want to say here is that you have to understand that everything revolves around your target audience. You got to ask yourself what your audience is really expecting to see, and that's going to guide your efforts. So, what is the law of success for a business or entrepreneurship podcasting? The first thing you want to do here is to choose a podcast topic, format, length, and style. Those four elements are critical. Okay, the topic, the format, the length, and style. TFLS. Okay, so that you have a clear idea what you really are going to talk about. So I want you to choose a podcast topic and decide what kind of format and style would be the most suitable for your audience. There are a number of different formats ranging from one-man shows, interviews, or even panel discussions. Okay, you'll need to consider what kind of content you think your audience and customer base will respond to the best. And one thing I want to say here is that if you think about podcasting around entrepreneurship, around finance, around business, you have to understand that your audience is going to guide you to choose one format over the other. Next, you want to set up your podcast equipment. So the setting up your podcast equipment is an important element, is an important law of success. Okay, because you want to have quality. You want to think about your audience. You want to really propose something of quality. Here, I'm speaking about microphone, headphones, and recording software. You also want to think about getting guests for your business/entrepreneurship podcast. Unless you are filming a solo only podcast, your next step is to think about what types of guests you want to interview on your podcast. So, inviting guests onto your business podcast is a great way to make waves within your industry, attract listeners, and engage your audience. That's what you want anyway. You also want to record, edit, and produce your podcast. Okay, so this is an important law of success for business entrepreneurship podcasting. And you also want to think about promoting your business podcast. That way you have a clear idea what works, what doesn't work. Okay, you're getting feedback from the public. And continue promoting individual episodes once they are released. This is also a quite essential law of success for business and entrepreneurship podcasting. So if you think about the law of success for a business or entrepreneurship podcasting, the big question you got to ask yourself is whether or not you can start a podcast for free. So if you are trying to revolve around the topic of business, it doesn't make sense to actually think about free product or freebies. This is not a good mindset to have. Okay, if you think about free, you're gonna get crappy products. Okay, so of course you can really think about getting some things on a budget. For example, you can think about podcast equipment on a budget. Okay, so you can spend like somewhere from $50 all the way to $1,000, or even $50 all the way to $100. So 50 to 100. Okay, so you can also think about so besides the podcast equipment, you can think about microphone. So you have a lot of best value microphones on the market that can really set you back maybe $99. Okay, so nothing really a huge, not a deal breaker. You also have headphones for podcasting. So you can have headphones, let's say, that deliver great sound quality and comfort levels for less than $100. So that's kind of cool. For instance, I have the one called the Audio Technica ATH M40X. I've covered this on another video. Very fantastic tool. You also have audio recorders or interfaces. So you can think about Behringer Xenix 1202 FX. That's just fantastic. This is a simple, get the job done kind of mixture. And for only $75, $77, you are able to get very nice equipment. So overall, I want you to think about the fact that you are going to see stuff that really resonates with your audience, but also you want to really have the right sort of setup to make sure that your business/entrepreneurship podcast is successful, let's say in the short and long run. Let me give you a few examples of software for recording your business/entrepreneurship podcast this year. So first you have Riverside. So Riverside actually is an industry leader for recording a podcast around business/entrepreneurship. And the platform does a great job because it really serves new and professional podcasters alike and delivers HD quality every single time. So as a browser-based software tool, Riverside is built to make your life easier, especially if you are a core business/entrepreneurship podcaster. So it is affordable. You can record from anywhere in the world. You have progressive uploads and you have transcriptions. Let me explain. When I say affordability, Riverside runs on a subscription-based model. You can choose between the free plan or the paid plans starting at $15, which come with additional features. You can record from anywhere in the world. So remote podcasting runs in this platform's blood. You can record with up to 7 guests from anywhere in the world, and every participant is automatically recorded locally. So you will get crystal clear audio and video, regardless of how near or far they are. So that's kind of cool. You also have progressive uploads. So the platform Riverside automatically progressively uploads each participant's recording as you record. So not only does this minimize the risk of data loss, but it really also saves you time at the end of your podcasting session. So no need to to wait around waiting for your sites to process because they are already waiting for you in your Riverside dashboard. So that's really good from a flexibility point of view. You also have transcriptions, okay? So within Riverside, you have an automatic transcription feature that makes it even faster to repurpose your podcast content and make your podcast accessible to more audiences. So, if you're thinking about the law of success for business entrepreneurship podcasting, you have to understand that your costs will pay. Your costs will be very relevant for the scalability of the podcast. So, how much should you pay per episode? Well, you want to pay as much or as little as you wanted to. Okay, basically, you can start a podcast for basically nothing. One cost to consider, though, is marketing. So if you are planning on running ads on Facebook, for instance, your bill may start to rack up. So you can also try to really have set up your podcast as an LLC. Okay, so LLC stands for a limited liability company, and so the reason some businesses choose to set their podcast up as an LLC is to actually limit their liability and optimize their tax situation. So establishing an LLC essentially enables you as a business owner to do a lot of things. So you can protect your personal assets, you can open up tax choices that benefits your bottom line, and also gain credibility, okay, with your customer base. So that's really this is really a legal and financial decision that will be specific to your business and podcasting circumstances. So there is one fixed answer, okay? So the best course of action will be to consult your lawyer and actually take notice. But that's really important. And you also have basically the possibility to make money with podcasting. Okay, there are a number of ways you can monetize your podcast and make money podcasting. You can strike lucrative deals with other businesses who want access to your captive audience or include ads in your podcast for a fee. Okay, you could also consider producing, let's say, specific merch or exclusive access in your let's say in your database. So that's really cool, especially in the long run. So one thing I want to say here is that when you think about starting a podcast, you have to understand that there is some possibility in terms of what's working for you and what's not working. Okay, so you can make money with podcasting, that's for sure. Okay, there are a number of ways you can monetize your podcast and make money podcasting. You can strike lucrative sponsorship deals with other businesses who want access to your captive audience or include ads in your business slash entrepreneurship podcast for a fee, of course. You can also consider producing podcast specific merch or exclusive access for your fan base. Okay, that's kind of cool. So, in terms of podcasts that business owners listen to, you have a large, let's say, a window here. Because as with music, taste in podcast is super personal. You find business owners listening to podcasts focusing on meditation or entrepreneurship motivation. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So one thing I want you to really understand here is that you have to choose something that really resonates with your target audience, especially in the long run. Okay, and but a podcast is always great for your business, and you are able to scale from there. And even better, you don't need a license to make a podcast. But if you are planning on including copyrighted material such as music, you probably need to obtain a license to use it for recording. So, what are the closing arguments here? To this conversation, I spoke to you about the law of success for business slash entrepreneurship podcasting. I give you the opening remarks, the fresh remarks, the the content, and finally the closing arguments. Thank you so much. God bless you. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.